If you agree that real power doesn't need to shout to be heard, like and subscribe, because this story will remind you that quiet strength can command a room louder than any rank ever could. She was just making tea. That's what everyone thought, anyway. The steam curled softly above the chipped white mug, sunlight catching the edge of the counter as Amelia Winters stirred her spoon once, twice, then set it down with the kind of precision that comes from years of discipline buried under routine. To the cadets lounging in the break room, she was just another nurse starting her morning shift, late 20s, polite smile, hair tied back too neatly for comfort. They didn't know her name carried a weight that once moved entire divisions. To them, she was background, someone who restocked medical supplies, filled out charts, offered soft smiles to the wounded and tired. The kind of person you forget to thank when you pass her in the hall. But then the base alarm went off. A harsh, pulsing wail ripped through the comm, turning every head toward the window. One cadet nearly dropped his coffee. The others froze, unsure whether it was a drill or something worse. And in that frozen instant, before anyone could react, the radio on the wall cracked alive with static, and a voice none of them recognized cut through the noise. Command to Major Winter. Authorization required for perimeter lockdown. Immediate. The word major seemed to hang in the air like a held breath. Every cadet turned toward her, eyes wide, unsure if they'd heard right. She didn't flinch, didn't even sigh. She simply reached forward, turned off the kettle, and said quietly, "Seal every door. No one leaves until I say." That tone, calm, clipped, and absolute, wasn't something you could fake. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was the voice of command, the kind that soldiers follow without thinking, the kind that wakes something old in people who've never seen war, but somehow recognize authority when it walks into a room. One cadet stammered, "Ma'am, Major, what's happening?" She didn't answer. Instead, she crossed the room, grabbed the radio handset from the wall, and pressed the button. Tactical command. This is Major Winter. Confirm breach alert and initiate lockdown protocol. The young man behind her, barely 20, fresh out of the academy, stood motionless, trying to process the sight. The woman who had spent the last 3 weeks patching up scraped knees and minor burns was suddenly issuing base-wide commands. She wasn't even wearing a uniform, just the plain gray of a medic, the sleeves rolled up past her elbows, a stethoscope dangling around her neck like an afterthought. But there was something about the way she moved, each step measured, each breath controlled, that erased any doubt that she'd been there before, wherever there was. Outside, the sound of boots on pavement echoed through the base as soldiers scrambled to stations. The siren wailed again. Somewhere in the distance, the faint hum of drones began to rise. One of the cadets reached for the blinds, peeking out over the runway, and froze. "Ma'am," he whispered, "there's movement near the north fence." Amelia's jaw tightened. For a second, the mask slipped just enough for the room to feel the weight behind her calm. Then she spoke, steady, direct, decisive. "Get the medbay ready. Secure oxygen lines and critical storage. If this goes bad, we'll have incoming within the hour." They didn't question her. Not one of them. They moved as if pulled by gravity, the same gravity that had held her together through years she never spoke of. As she moved toward the main console, one cadet whispered to another, "She's a major?" The other just shook his head, still staring. "How? She's our age." And in a way, she was. Barely 28. But with eyes that looked older. Eyes that had seen command, loss, and the kind of silence that never leaves you after the field. The radio crackled again, louder this time, the urgency clear. "Major Winter, unidentified, drones crossing perimeter grid 3. Awaiting lockdown code." She pressed the transmit button without hesitation. "Code Echo 7 Bravo. Authorize lockdown." Full sweep. The cadets barely understood the words, but the operators on the other end sure did. A metallic clang rolled across the base as steel gates slammed shut and lights along the outer walls flickered red. Somewhere, a mechanical voice repeated, "Perimeter lockdown in effect." One of the younger cadets, Miller, still too new to understand what fear felt like, asked softly, "Ma'am, is this an attack?" She didn't look at him. "Not yet," she said, "but we prepare as if it is." In the sudden quiet between alarms, she turned briefly toward the window. The reflection caught her face in the glass, half shadow, half sunlight, And for a second, she wasn't the quiet medic anymore. She was something else entirely. A leader who'd stood in command tense as artillery fire shook the earth. A soldier who'd once been saluted by generals and carried the weight of lives on her orders. The silence in the room stretched thin until one of the cadets whispered, almost to himself, "Major Winter, you led the Norvac evacuation, didn't you?" Her eyes flicked toward him, and though she didn't answer, the faintest tightening of her jaw was enough. They all knew. They'd studied that operation in tactics class. How a 24-year-old commander had led a doomed team through a valley under fire, saving 58 soldiers when everyone else thought they were lost. They'd never known her name. Not until now. A burst of static jolted them back to the present. All units report in. North sector clear. South gate, visual confirmation needed. She turned, pointing to 2 cadets. "You and you. Thermal optics. Stay low. Report movement." They scrambled without a word. The rest followed her to the med bay, now a flurry of motion. She checked supplies with the same precision she'd once used to check weapon systems. Her hands never shook. Even as distant thuds echoed from the airstrip, she was unshaken, focused, centered. She wasn't just leading, she was teaching, in silence, what leadership really looked like. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the second alarm cut off. Only the low hum of generators remained. Amelia exhaled slowly, shoulders easing just a fraction, though her eyes stayed fixed on the window. "That's a test run," she murmured more to herself than to anyone else. "They're probing the fence, seeing how fast we respond." The cadets glanced at each other, uncertain whether to be relieved or terrified. One of them finally spoke, his voice small, almost apologetic. "Ma'am, we didn't know who you were." Her expression softened, just barely. "You didn't need to," she said. "Just know what to do when it counts." And with that, she picked up her now cold mug of tea, took a slow sip, and set it down again. Outside, the sun climbed higher over the base. The alarm's silent now, but everyone's still frozen in awe. No one dared to speak. Because sometimes, the loudest moment in a soldier's life isn't the sound of gunfire or command. It's the moment silence reveals who's really in charge. The base stayed locked down long after the alarms faded, and for hours the air carried a different kind of silence, the kind that follows revelation. The cadets who had once laughed in that same break room now avoided meeting her eyes, still trying to reconcile the calm medic with the woman who had just commanded an entire tactical lockdown with the poise of a field general. Major Amelia Winter, late 20s, youngest officer to ever receive the Silver Crest for valor. The one they'd studied in declassified field ops like a legend from another era. And she'd been right there beside them, pouring tea, patching sprains, moving through corridors like a ghost with a purpose. The shift commander, Colonel Reeves, finally arrived, stepping into the med bay with the brittle tension of a man who knew he was late to his own crisis. "Major Winter," he said, half salute, half question, his tone somewhere between respect and disbelief. She didn't make him wait for an explanation. "Perimeter secure. Drone breach likely recon. No payloads detected. Recommend continued high alert for 12 hours. Reeves nodded, trying not to look as rattled as he felt. Command had kept her reassignment classified to avoid drawing attention. No one on the medical base was supposed to know that the quiet woman in gray scrubs once led Task Force Kepler through one of the most disastrous combat evacuations in history, and brought half her team home against impossible odds. The cadets lingered by the door, pretending to clean up supplies, but really just trying to stay near her, like gravity had shifted toward wherever she stood. When the colonel left, she didn't relax. She stood by the window again, watching the fences where shadows moved like ghosts in the floodlight glare, her hand resting lightly on the frame, as if still feeling the pulse of the moment. "You did well," she said softly, not turning. The cadets froze, then realized she was talking to them. "You didn't panic." One of them, the youngest, Miller, shifted awkwardly, cheeks still red from embarrassment. "We didn't really do anything, ma'am." Her eyes flicked toward him, and for the first time, she smiled, though it was faint and tired. "That's the point," she said. "Doing nothing wrong is better than doing the wrong thing fast." There was something about the way she said it that felt lived in, like it came from a place far beyond textbooks and drills. She walked past them, checking monitors, reconfiguring data terminals, every motion exact, efficient. But underneath that precision, Something else lived, something heavy. Years of orders that had cost lives, of decisions made in the dark, of silence carried like armor. Later, as dusk settled over the base and the red lights dimmed to amber, two of the cadets found her sitting alone on the steps outside the med bay, the wind tugging at her sleeves. They hesitated before joining her, unsure if they were allowed. She noticed them but didn't move. "You want to ask?" she said quietly, eyes still fixed on the distant fence line. The older one, Harper, nodded. "Ma'am, back in tactics school, we studied the Norvac Valley operation. They said the commanding officer made a mistake." She finished for him, her voice flat but steady. "That's what the report says, right?" Harper swallowed. "They said she disobeyed orders." Amelia's eyes flickered in the low light, the kind of look that could hold two truths at once. "I did," she said. "I was told to hold position until air support arrived. But air support was 40 minutes out, and my unit had 6 minutes before total exposure. So I broke command. Saved 58 lives. Lost 9. She paused. "And one of those 9 was my brother." The cadets didn't know what to say. The air seemed to still around her words. "They called it disobedience," she continued softly. "Command called it courage. Depends who you asked." She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees, the faint lines of exhaustion crossing her face despite her youth. "That's why I came here," she said. "Medicine doesn't ask who gave the order. It just asks who needs saving." For a long while, none of them spoke. The floodlights hummed faintly. Somewhere, a siren wailed and faded into the desert wind. Finally, Miller asked, "So, when they called you back today, you already knew what to do?" Her lips curved slightly, almost amused. "You never forget," she said. "Command is like breathing. You can stop doing it for years, but the moment someone says your name on the radio, your pulse remembers." She looked down at her hands, then at the ring on her finger, a simple band, scuffed and dulled by time. "Every time I think I've left it behind, it finds me again." She stood, straightened her jacket, and the young men scrambled to attention, instinctively saluting though she hadn't asked them to. "You don't have to salute," she said with a quiet chuckle. "Not anymore." But they didn't drop their hands until she walked back inside. That night, the base settled into uneasy calm. The cadets lingered in the barracks, whispering about her, their voices soft with a kind of reverence they hadn't earned yet. "She doesn't look old enough to have led a war," one said. Another replied, "Maybe that's what makes her different." And somewhere down the corridor, Amelia Winters stood alone in the operations room, reviewing the security footage frame by frame. The drones had been small, low-tech, too deliberate to be random, too quiet to be standard recon. She made a note in the log, her handwriting sharp and deliberate. Asterisk possible pre-attack probe. Recommend sector patrol increase. Asterisk then she sat back, exhaling slowly, her reflection caught in the monitor glow. The woman staring back wasn't the one the cadets saw. That one carried memories like scars, discipline like armor, and a past too heavy to set down. She closed the report, powered down the screen, and whispered to no one. "Once you lead, you never really stop." And somewhere outside, unseen in the dark, a camera blinked once and powered off, as if acknowledging she was right. Morning came too quickly, dragging with it a strange calm, the kind that never lasts. The cadets moved with quiet purpose now, the jokes gone, the laughter replaced by an awareness that something larger than them walked their halls in gray scrubs. Amelia Winter was already awake when the first siren cut the morning stillness again. But this time, it wasn't a false alarm. From the control tower came the call, multiple signals inbound, unidentified, fast-moving. The room snapped into motion. She didn't hesitate. "Activate lockdown protocol," she said, her voice steady but sharper than before. The cadets didn't need convincing this time. They moved like trained soldiers, not rookies. Outside, the hum of engines grew louder. 3 drones, low and coordinated, flying toward the north fence. One carried a small payload. She'd seen that configuration before. "Get everyone inside," she shouted, sprinting to the command console. Her fingers flew across the controls, rerouting the defense grid manually, because the automated system still hadn't reset from the night before. A split-second decision, a memory from years of command. She rerouted power to the western turret, aimed it by instinct, and fired. The drone exploded midair, white flash, brief shockwave. The other two veered off, scattering into the distance. For a moment, no one spoke. The shock wave echoed across the base, dust swirling in golden light. She stood at the console, motionless, her heartbeat even, her face unreadable. One of the cadets whispered, "You saved us." She turned toward him, her expression calm but her voice soft. "No, we saved us. You followed orders. That's what keeps people alive." As the all-clear sounded, Colonel Rees arrived again, breathless and pale. "Major, what?" She cut him off gently. "It's over. Debrief at 0900. He nodded, too stunned to argue. When he left, the cadets lingered, waiting for her to say something more. Instead, she looked at the horizon, where smoke still curled faintly, and said quietly, "War never really ends. It just changes address." Later, when the day quieted and the base returned to its rhythm, the cadets found her teacup again, half full, cold, still sitting where she'd left it before the alarm. One of them, Miller, picked it up carefully, as if it were sacred, and set it on the counter. "She never even finished her tea," he said. The others just nodded, silent. And somewhere beyond the base, a report would reach command by nightfall. Unauthorized drone incursion neutralized by Major Amelia Winter, acting medical officer. But the report wouldn't capture what they saw. The steadiness, the calm, the quiet kind of strength that didn't need medals or recognition to matter. As dusk fell again, Amelia sat on the same steps where she'd spoken the night before, hands wrapped around a fresh cup, eyes distant but at peace. The base was safe. Her cadets had learned. And for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself a small, tired smile. Because sometimes, being ready isn't about war. It's about knowing exactly who you still are when it comes knocking again.